This event is brought to you by the Soto Zen Buddhist Association and is generously funded by the Hemera Foundation. And I am delighted to introduce our facilitator, Reverend Ben Connolly. Reverend Ben Connolly serves as Vice President of the SCBA Board and Chair of the SCBA DEIA Committee. He has been instrumental in organizing today's offering. Again, thank you all for being here. Reverend Connolly, please take it from here.
Right. Thank you so much, Zena. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Just as we're beginning, I'm just going to invite people to, if you know how, to go into your gallery view and just kind of look around at the people who you are with. Among the things that this gathering is about, it is about people encountering each other and connecting. And so just seeing, maybe you see some people you know, maybe you see someone you'll hear from in a little bit or meet in a small group. Okay, so this is Zen in Interfaith Practice Gathering is just a way for us to share some inspiration, some ideas, experiences about the experience of engaging in interfaith practice as Zen practitioners. And you know, there are many aspects of interfaith practice that we can manifest, Zen practice we can manifest through interfaith. So focusing on creating collectively sustainable and healthy communities, deeply hearing voices that have views that are different than ours, letting go of fixed views and ideologies, finding our own particular expressions of the truth. And so we're going to have some words from our panelists first, and then we'll do about a half an hour of that, and then we're going to have about 20 minutes where we'll go into small groups and you can connect with folks. And then we're going to end with about a half an hour of time for Q&A and dialogue with panelists. So I would like to introduce our panelists. And let's see, I'm going to change my view now so I can see my folks a little better. Yeah. So Reverend Ruben Abito is a Zen teacher and former Jesuit priest from the Philippines. He is the guiding teacher at Maria Kanon Zen Center in Dallas and an authorized teaching in the Sanbo Zen International lineage. He's written many books, including Living Zen, Loving God, which may give you a window into his insight into the material we're talking about today. And I've had, opportunities for some personal connection with Ruben, and just so grateful that I'm going to have this time to be with you. And Dr. Pamela Ayo Yatunde, JD, MA, THD, those are a set of letters you don't see after every person's name, is a Soto Zen practitioner and community Dharma leader, certified through Spirit Rock. She's a prominent educator in pastoral and community care and has extensive experience in multi-faith environments and exploring spirituality in the works of Prince and Audre Lorde. I personally have my copy of her new book, Dearly Beloved, on the theology of Prince, awaiting my reading, which I think was just published in the last week or so. So excited to see that myself, but also just to hear your experience and your words about bringing your practice to interfaith community and interfaith living. So thank you so much. All right. Well, as I said before, each of the three of us is going to start by sharing for about 10 minutes, just to give some ideas about basically what brings us to interfaith practice, what we find inspiring or beneficial within interfaith practice, and then perhaps as well some challenges. So I'm going to talk pretty personally here, just directly from my experience. So I did not have much interest in interfaith work when I was originally involved in Zen, and even after I was ordained. Largely because I sort of was like, oh, I'm not all that interested in religion. I just want to practice. And I was thinking about it sort of in a non-religious way. But at some point in about 2016, we saw a really big spike in anti-Islamic sentiment in the United States and in my community. And I really wanted to find ways to connect to Muslim people so I could be a better ally in supporting them and being safe in our country. And also, I saw in 2016 what seemed like a really strong growing split between religious conservative communities and the kind of people that I hung out with who were, Christian religious conservative communities, and a lot of people that I knew. And so I thought, I want to connect with people across these religious divides. And so then I just, I saw an event at a mosque that was an interfaith event. I thought I'll go to that. And I found some really nice connections with people, and I found some inspiration. And that just kind of opened up the door. And at some point I realized it doesn't, this, this location of being involved in interfaith work provides me an opportunity to really connect with people across difference that I could not have in any other way. And as a Zen practitioner, it's a way of me sort of like leveraging my position so that I can help people more, because I do occupy a particular space within the interfaith landscape. So I can say that from that first meeting I went to, where I just connected with a few people and heard a speech and ate some lunch, I was like, okay, well, I'll go to another thing. And now I have gone to a lot of things. Basically, interfaith practice for me has involved many different types of activities, going to meetings, going to people's events where they're giving talks, going to rallies, going to vigils. But it predominantly has mostly been a matter of just showing up. I get emails from people who are going to have an event, and I go. And it's been wonderful. I have developed really pretty close relationships with a few organizations in Minnesota, the Minnesota Multi-Faith Network, which I was on the original steering committee and was the first president of that organization when we first formed, and it's now been going as a nonprofit for about 5 years. And then Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, which is there's interfaith power and light groups all over the country, and they focus largely on climate justice in an interfaith context, interfaith work to promote climate justice. And then I'm also very involved with the multi-faith anti-racist change and healing group here in Minnesota, which is a bunch of radical clergy nuts. We were originally basically advocating for queer liberation, and then shifted focus to be more focused on anti-racism. Anyway, so these groups have provided me just wonderful opportunities to connect with people and to engage in work that has been really meaningful. So one thing that happened when I first started going to Min meetings is I would sit down at a table, and one person at the table would be like, I'm representing the Minnesota Rabbinical Society. And someone else would be like, I'm representing the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church for this region. And I'd be like, I work at a Zen center. And, so I felt very humble, but also I just realized where I live, I don't know about where you live, there's not a lot of deep connection between different Buddhist communities and lineages. And so that was very motivating me to see how the interfaith work of connecting across interfaith also inspired me to be really interested in connecting across Buddhist traditions. And so I've been able to do a lot of that kind of work, and mostly it's been very it's not formal. So just organizing, helping people connect, showing up for people's stuff, saying, what if we all got together and did something? And out of that, just general organizing that I got to be a part of, beautiful and powerful things happened. So in 2020, as many of you know, Minneapolis was the site of the murder of George Floyd, and kind of an epicenter of a global uprising. And that tragic and horrible event of his murder did spur many people to take really beautiful actions. And a few days after George Floyd was murdered, we had in Minnesota what I'm pretty sure was the largest gathering of Buddhist clergy in the same place ever. And it was just a matter of organizing. People who had, like me, who had been just casually organizing, helping people to connect, reached out to each other, and there was going to be a silent clergy march from Sabathani Community Center down to what has now become known as George Floyd Square. And people just started reaching out. How can we get together and show up? And people showed up in numbers, and it's hard to know what the impact of an action like that is, but it's meaningful. And when we would share images of it, it was meaningful and motivating to other people to be like, yes, you can show up. Yes, this work matters. Yes, we can do it together. And yes, we can do it even though we may have profound differences. And so that's one example of just, and I've been involved in many other kind of beautiful moments like this. Now, I can also say I've been encountered some great difficulties in doing interfaith work. So when we launched Min Min on the first night, we had this big event and it was really fun. It was like a gala in a giant synagogue. And it was, there was all this joyful energy and people hugging and taking their pictures with our new logo. And then I didn't know it, but there was a conversation that happened between some of the members who were there that was incredibly upsetting to those people. And it had to do with a longstanding religious conflict in Asia that I knew existed, but had never really given a lot of thought to, nor did I think it would be a big part of our work. And then, because I was at that time, became the president of the board, I spent 6 to 9 months just trying to help people talk to each other and understand each other, because the amount of personal and collective trauma those people had encountered in relationship to the violence between their religious traditions was really profound. And it was really hard for me, and I suspect it was hard for them and for a lot of other people. It was hard for our organization. And I just held in my heart that it's valuable for us the only way we can understand interdependence really is by moving towards connection and understanding each other. So it felt fundamental to my Zen practice to show up, to try and do it from a place of non-reactivity, and from with the courage that the Bodhisattva texts inspire us to, and just stay in relationship. And that organization has thrived, and many of those people are still in it. Some are not, and but we did the work, and these kind of challenges come up quite a bit. I can just say, intersectionality is really challenging to address in interfaith context. Like, if you want to be formally for queer liberation, but you want to have the Catholic Church be part of your organization, how do you work that? That's a very ongoing challenge that I live with. And in many other ways. If we say we're formally anti-racist, we find that we really struggle to get Christian conservative communities to engage with our work at all. So these challenges are there. And the thing is, I just come back to, like, how can I possibly be in conversation with you? I have the strength to do that. My Zen practice is about having the groundedness that I can be that person who makes that space. So it's been really wonderful, really inspiring. I mean, I spent months in interfaith and Buddhist work with indigenous water protectors in northern Minnesota, and we did some beautiful work of building connections across differences to create sustainable communities to practice together for protecting our planet. And I could just say, like, and I made all kinds of boneheaded maneuvers and made people mad and had to apologize, by the way. I should mention that. And as I'm wrapping up here, I say, so many hugs, so much love, uh, so much love, so many hugs. A couple months after the October 7th Hamas attack in Israel, we've seen such a fracture between many communities that to some degree sparked. And We just, at Minnesota Multi-Faith Network, we had a silent vigil where we walked from one end of a bridge across the Mississippi and back. And people just showed up, people who weren't even talking to each other anymore. And there were some hugs and there were some smiles. We had 0 speeches. We made a rule, no speeches. I rang a bell at the beginning and I rang a bell at the end, and that was it. And sometimes just being together with your bodies is as good as it's going to get, and it's well worth doing. So, really grateful to have this time to share with you. Thanks so much for listening. And I want to pass the mic over to my beloved friend, Io. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I could have listened to you a lot longer. You covered so many things like your motivation, um, and I'm stuck on that. So I think maybe I'll start there. This desire to be in relationship with others, I think, is what called me to enter faith engagement. I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and in our church and in our family, we were told regularly that we had the superior belief system. And so I guess I believed that for a long time. And with that belief, then there was no need to understand anybody else's belief system. Obviously, why would I engage in inferior belief systems? Not that the people were inferior, but the belief system definitely. But then as I got older and realized that we did not own the truth of everything, and that it was actually very difficult to live into that truth. Um, and as I began to branch out of my neighborhood and out of college and so on, I began to encounter people who didn't have the same belief system and had other beliefs uh, that I was intrigued by, curious about, appreciated, some that I didn't. But it just drew me into the fact that there are many, many worldviews, and I know nothing about them. And I'm on this planet right now with this deep ignorance of why people believe what they believe, what it means to them. And so I began to get curious and do research. But my commitment to interfaith dialogue and interfaith practice started when I was a student with the Sati Center for Buddhist Studies in their chaplaincy program. And it was I guess you could say no, I take that back. When I was a volunteer with Zen Hospice Project, now called the Zen Caregiving Project in San Francisco, I would say that was my first commitment to engaging in interfaith work, even though I didn't know that that's what I was doing. Um, but when I realized that I wanted to continue doing this work and that I wanted more skill in this type of dialogue, I began to commit myself to being skillful in interfaith dialogue when I was a student with the Sati Center for Buddhist Studies. And as I was thinking about our talk today, I was reminded of the fact that I have this watch. I don't know if you can see it, but this watch is over 20 years old. And this watch is something that I laid on an altar when I was at Sati Center. We were asked to bring an altar item to represent our deepest desire. And I forgot to bring my altar item. So I said, oh my gosh, I must have something that I can put on the altar. So I took the watch off and they said, now try to imagine that you are actually imbuing this thing with your deepest intention. And so I said, I'm going to imbue this watch with the intention of being able to connect with everybody I meet on something. There's got to be something that I can connect with despite our differences that might actually lead us into our differences. So I've kept this watch as a reminder of my intention that I still have, which is to be able to connect with people on some level across our differences and now with our differences. Since going through that training over 20 years ago, I pursued more education to become more skilled. And I would say that being interested and engaged in interfaith dialogue as a practice It's just so enriching. It's so enlivening. It gets me out of my bubble of delusion about my own beliefs and my own thoughts. It's challenging, as Ben had talked about. Sometimes I'm very unskillful. I'm walking on landmines that I didn't know existed. I'm ready to apologize for that which I didn't know. And then also, I know that there's at least one area of interfaith practice, if you will, that I can't cross the line on it. Maybe there are two, but I can't cross the line into appreciation for it. It's just beyond me. And I share that to say, please don't feel that you have to agree with everything everybody does, every belief system, every practice. That's not required for interreligious and interfaith dialogue. I think what is required is respect, is respecting that every person has come to be who they are through a vast network of causes and conditions that we could never know about, and to be humble about that and accept the person as they are and accept ourselves as we are and go from there. I don't know if I've taken up my time, but see if there's anything else. I will also say the importance of the fact that those of us who live in countries where religious freedom is supposedly protected, it's a beautiful thing. And if you've ever been in a place where that's not protected, then you'll understand we are in a position of opportunity, that peace and promoting peace depends on our ability to accept these differences, appreciate them, and even protect those who are not part of our group, and ask for protection from people who are not part of our group. This is what it means to be in solidarity, especially in these times where there's a growing movement around, at least in the States, a growing movement around Christian nationalism, and it's very dangerous. So I'll leave it at that for now, and know that we have small groups to talk about whatever we want to talk about, and then we'll come together after Ruben shares. So thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ayo. Both Ben and Ayo talked about interreligious or interfaith engagement with people of other traditions towards causes that are of concern for all of us as human beings. I would like more to focus on what is called intra-faith or intra-religious encounters. That means the encounter of two or more traditions within one person. And I'd like to begin by reading a statement from the email that I received from Zina about Soto Zen, which says, the Soto Zen Buddhist Association seeks to make Soto practice available to everyone. We work to transform barriers based on race, ethnicity, gender, identity, religion, political affiliation, economic class, sexual orientation, age, and ability. We find harmony in both our differences and what we share. So, giving an example from my own Zen tradition, when I began practice in the San-un Zendo in Kamakura, Japan, I happened to be there. I was sent as a Jesuit from the Philippines to be in Japan, and I was drawn to Zen practice. And so my Zen master, Yamada Koun, was very open-hearted about welcoming people from other faith traditions and just giving them basically what he understood was Zen in its essence. Now, his own teacher, Yasutani Hakun, had this principle that said, you cannot really practice true Zen unless you become Buddhist. So if you're Christian or Muslim or some other faith, you have to leave your religious faith at the door and then come in and become Buddhist so that you can receive the fullness of what Zen has to offer. But my teacher, Yamada Koun, somehow did not make that kind of restriction. And he said, well, if you're Christian, come here and just sit with us in silence and we'll see what happens. And through the years of guiding many, including Japanese Buddhists or people with no religion, and then also some Jewish persons and Christian persons, he noticed that those who came from the Jewish and the Christian traditions also deepened in their practice as we sat together. And so in that regard, he felt that there was something that he could also learn from other traditions. So he started learning about specifically the Christian tradition, because there were more Christians among especially his international followers who sat with him. So with that in mind, what I just read from your own statement about the principles of Soto Zen, that Soto Zen welcomes everyone, no matter what their race, class, ethnicity, or religion may be, can be really something that is really welcoming and enable a person, for example, who may be a Christian or may have been a former Christian and then was dissatisfied with their faith, and they're looking for something that will fill their hearts. And then so they will feel welcome and they don't feel that they have to become Buddhist in that formal sense. So in that regard, I feel that this way of welcoming people across faith traditions in a practice that we can all share. We don't have to declare our doctrinal beliefs when we sit together in silence. And as most, if not all of you have found out, really it's that place and time of silence, and as Ben mentioned, where we are present with our bodies together, that can really create that kind of bonding. And then when we talk, well, that's when our doctrinal or perspectival differences come, and that's when we can iron them out precisely based on that bonding that we've already shared, based on that experiential sense of being able to sit together in silence. So in that regard, that's the task that I see that we all are called to take on, namely to really enable our practice, specifically Zen practice, to enable anyone from any tradition to really dig into that place of silence, and in doing so, understand themselves, understand the Zen Buddhist tradition, but also, in a sense, understand their own root tradition better and see it in a new light. And this is something that's happened in so many individual cases. There is a book, by the way, that I recall, edited by a friend of mine, Harold Kazimov, is a professor of Jewish studies at Grinnell University. He's retired now, together with John Keenan and Linda Keenan, called Beside Still Waters, Jews and Christians Encounter the Buddha. And here he collects testimonies from those who come from the Jewish tradition or the Christian tradition, who then were into Buddhist practice, most of them Zen, some of them insight or vipassana and so on. Maybe there are one or two who were in Tibetan practice. And precisely because of that practice, enable them to look at their root tradition with new eyes and see how it can be transformed in a more open way. Like Ayo said earlier that she grew up in a United Methodist community where everybody felt we are superior to others and so on. And I also am in a Catholic tradition, and that's also the so-called mainline doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. But precisely because of this experience, I can challenge that and say, look, there is so much truth and goodness and holiness and beauty around the world. Let's look at that and see whether that may come from the same source that we proclaim our source of truth and goodness and beauty. And because of that, we can then break the barriers across those traditions and then find understanding. And so when we get together in causes that unite us as human beings, causes of justice, causes of equality, and so on, then we may also have conversations about our own traditions, not just saying, okay, you're Zen Buddhist, I'm Catholic, or I'm Muslim, and let's respect one another. Fine, I agree with that. But on the other hand, there's something that we may be able to learn from one another as we go deep into our own traditions, and then maybe as we even try out the kind of thing that Zen has to offer. So when I had practiced in Japan for some years, and there were many more Christians from international places who were visiting Japan in summer, they would take their summers off from wherever they were, and they would practice Zen under Yamada Koun Roshi's guidance. Many of them were pastors or religious sisters and so on. And so he noticed that they were also maturing in their Zen practice. So he was hoping that they could also bring back what they learned in Zen from him to their respective countries and teach Zen there. So he said to us, I am a Buddhist and I can only teach you about Zen from what I know from the Buddhist tradition. But really what we experience in Zen is beyond words and beyond letters. That's the basic principle of Zen. It goes beyond words and letters. And so if someone has really attained that place beyond words and letters, and they show it in their way of life, in the way they see things, in the way they see with wisdom and compassion, then that is really what Zen is all about, to transform us from self-egoic centered human beings to that unnameable reality that enables us to see everyone with that bonding and that sense of kinship. And so he said, when you go back to your respective communities, you go to a Christian community, learn their Bible, learn their theology so that you can speak their language and bring them to that place of stillness beyond words through the language that they know. You don't have to use Buddhist terms. You can quote Buddhist terms, of course, but the language that they're familiar with can lead them to that place and enable them to be transformed in the way that Zen does in so many different ways. So in that regard, I feel that it's a task of exploration. How can we look at the different religious traditions and find in them those pointers that can lead us to that kind of transformative experience that we find in our Zen practice? So those are the kinds of things that are in mind as I share in this forum on interfaith, but also I'd like to add the dimension of intrafaith. Thank you. And I look forward to our discussion after this.
This is the point where we're going to move into our small breakout rooms for further discussion. And I am setting that up right now. I just want to remind you that if you prefer to place an X in front of your name, if you would prefer to not be in a room, we'll place you in a Noble Silence group. And so, okay. And oh, I'm so sorry. And Ben has something else to say. So sorry about that.
Hey, all good, all good. I just couldn't unmute. We got it sorted out. So yeah, thanks so much for the organizing there, Zena, and really appreciated hearing from Ruben and Io. What I was really enjoying that there's each of us touched on something pretty distinct, and that's, we're scratching the surface here. So how enriching for me. Anyway, so as we move into small groups, I want to talk a little bit about how we're inviting you to communicate in the small groups, and then I'll give you kind of the topic that we're hoping you will talk about, and the idea you'll be in there for probably 15 or 20 minutes, I think. So I'm going to sort of go through in short form some things that were in the communication agreements we sent, and since we're not in a great place to take consensus about them as agreements, I'm just going to say them as suggestions and invitations and hope that you will follow along with them. So I'm not going to go through the whole list. I want to focus on some that I think are particularly pertinent in this context. So one is just trying it on. So when other people are speaking, really focusing on trying to deeply understand what they are telling you. So this is a great aspect of interfaith practice. Instead of sort of putting the lens of your perspective or thinking about how you respond, or even when they're right or wrong, trying to take that focus on just how deeply can I take in this other person's view and connect with them through that gesture. Speaking from the heart. So when you're speaking, we're just inviting you to talk about the heart of the matter. The heart could be like from the emotional core, but yeah, talk about these are deeply meaningful questions about our spirituality, about how we connect to each other, about how we can create beloved communities. So, speaking from the heart, uh, we are inviting you to practice self-focus. So, mainly just try not to speak for whole groups. This can really cause harm. The term we is a little bit dangerous. Everybody gets quite dangerous sometimes, or all the Muslims or whatever. So just trying to be careful about generalizing. And if you focus on yourself and your own experience, that's an easy way to avoid that trap or that tendency. Um, if something comes up where someone is hurt in the conversation, in the communications agreements we sent, it says focus on impact rather than intention. So the idea here is it goes back to that trying it on. You want to focus on understanding the other person's view instead of sort of explaining why what you said didn't mean what they thought it did or whatever. So if something comes up, and this has happened to me many times in interfaith small group meetings, where I say something that someone is hurt by, just stopping there and really trying to understand them. If you feel like you've been misunderstood, it's okay to say that, but you want to focus on understanding them and helping them see that you are making that choice. If you can. And just as an addendum, and I don't want to make people feel like they're on eggshells or something here, we really should recognize in interfaith contexts that huge amounts of harm and suffering have come through inter-religious and intra-religious conflict. People within themselves with multiple religious identities and family challenges, people have been harmed within their religious context that they live in. They've been harmed. There's, wars. There's been interreligious conflicts for thousands of years. So really pausing to let that in and come from a place where we understand that this is the kind of material we're talking about, so that if something comes up that is harmful to someone, we can really pause and manifest the most possible compassion. Practicing both and is good, which is you don't have to say, you said that, but I say this. You can just say, you said that, and I say this. So, the Hawaiian tradition, the Buddhist tradition gives us the idea of the proliferation of views. So, as Buddhists, we can really celebrate that. We don't have to put anything in conflict with anything. We can let our view come up as whole and listen to other people's views as whole. And moving up, moving back, just making sure that you're making room for everyone to talk, or if you're extremely reticent, trying to bring your voice as an act of generosity. And lastly, there's a lot of ways to think about confidentiality, but I think for this meeting, we'll just invite you to hold confidence in this way. You can share any learnings you have in your groups, but don't say anything that could identify a person. And if someone tells you that they want you to share, that's fine. But generally speaking, that will make it so people can feel safe and that they can be honest if they want to talk about challenging personal matters. So does that feel good enough to everyone for general consensus on doing that?
And I love what you said, Ben, about beloved community. And I
Mm.
already feel the love for everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And a term that we really inherit from the, such an inspiring tradition of African American leadership for justice in this country. So, what we're going to invite you to talk about here is just what's calling you to think about interfaith practice or engaging in it. So, your personal calling toward this topic. And you could also talk about if you have done some, like challenges or inspirations or beneficial things you've seen. So, you might just be like, I'm just checking this out. That's okay. Why are you checking it out? Maybe you've been doing this for years and years. So, these basic questions: what's calling you to the work or the practice of engaging in interfaith? What challenges have you found, or what inspirations and benefits have you seen? So I think that's enough from me, and we're gonna send you in here for let's go till 3:30. Yeah, I will call on folks for your questions, and yeah, we have about 20 minutes here for this part. So just inviting, we'd love to hear lots of voices. So, and it actually helps if you like think you might want to speak, put your hand up so we can see the whole row, and we have a sense of like time. But why don't we just go ahead and I'll call on Ruzan. Hello, Ruzan.
Hi. Fancy seeing everybody here. I have a very easy logistical question. I had a lovely time with my breakout group. I was going to chat my contact info, but I can't. How can we go about reaching out to our breakout group just to have more communications? Is there a way to facilitate that?
I'm gonna send that one over to Keegan and Jico. Do you have an answer for that?
Sure. So normally we don't have the chat function totally open so that we're not whispering as our presenters are speaking. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the chat function now. So if you'd like to exchange emails, you can do so in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
First of all, could you tell us your location, Ruzan?
Yes, I am in Minnesota with
Okay.
our friend Ben and others.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So yeah, we're inviting questions, or if you have something you want to share with the group, brief reflections are quite welcome as well. Kosatsu.
Thank you. First of all, I greatly appreciate this discussion. I have had limited interfaith experience. I have served as a chaplain with the local university and been invited to some interfaith discussions there. I have been recently asked to participate in an interfaith discussion in a corporate environment. And I wonder if there are any guidance about any particular landmines to avoid, or anything that might be different than doing it than in a corporate environment, if anybody has experience there.
I would, if I may, I just want to say briefly that, thank you for your question. And it sounds like if you've been offering spiritual care in a pluralistic setting, you have been in some way engaged in interfaith dialogue, appreciation, whether it's explicit or implicit. Some of the entities chaplains work in have a religious mission, and they are focused on making sure that their mission is incorporated throughout the entire corporation. But for a corporation that doesn't have a religious mission, I think it's important to have a dialogue and support a dialogue in such a way that doesn't support the imposition of a religious view, whether the corporation was founded on religious principles or not. For example, let's say Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby apparently has a religious, or even Chick-fil-A, right? They have embedded within their corporate personality a religious view, but that doesn't mean that everyone who works for those entities have the same religious beliefs. So I think to facilitate interfaith or dialogue within a corporation, if they don't have a religious mission, then support that dialogue in such a way that does not encourage the imposition of a belief system on the employees.
Thank you. May I just request if it's okay to have everyone first speak, tell about their location, and then you can ask your question. So Kosetsu, where are you located, if I may?
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Thank you. It just helps to get a sense of the geographical breadth of this community. So thank you.
Before we move on to the next question online, we do have a question in the chat. if I may. Is there a way to continue these kinds of dialogues regularly?
Ben, your call.
Well, I don't know if SCBA, SCBA could have the opportunity to do that. We have affinity groups and stuff. So if we felt a lot of people were asking for this, those are pretty self-organizing. So if you're talking about within SCBA, you could probably email Keegan, and if we get a few emails, she'll pass it on to someone and say, "Do you want to do something?" But broadly speaking, I really think there are lots of people doing interfaith work, and it's kind of got to look around. So I ended up in interfaith work because I just started looking for emails, doing some Google searches, and just, I went to some events. I was like, oh, this isn't really my group. Other ones, it was like, oh, I feel like I'm making a connection here. So that little effort on your part to find sustained relationships is really worth doing. It could happen within SCBA, but I'm sort of encouraging people to just do it where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just the simple search, I think a lot will come up. And also I will add that there's an organization in Chicago called Interfaith America that I think will be a great resource for supporting ongoing support around dialogues.
All right, well, let's just kind of keep working down here. I see Unkyo.
Hello, I'm Unkyo Ginny. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And my question is, well, I'm really inspired by what I heard a little bit in each of our panelists say around interfaith work involving knowing that you're not always going to be perfect and you might make mistakes and you might do some harm, and so I'm interested in hearing suggestions for practices that can help one approach this kind of work with a humble attitude, but like not having that fear of making a mistake or doing harm get in the way of even engaging in the first place.
I defer to my colleagues to begin.
One thing that I have found helpful in connecting with people of other traditions or people who are different from me is first to hold them in my heart with that sense of kinship. And that's what I feel our Zen practice enables us to do, namely to be able to open our hearts and look at everyone and everything around and see that we're all kin. So if we approach somebody from that attitude already, somehow it gets transmitted, and hopefully it can also elicit a sense of at least acceptance on their part. So then that's when we can begin. That's just one thought I had, to first of all do our own homework in beginning by embracing the other that we're supposed to meet, or others, from our heart as kin to us. And so with that, then we have confidence in ourselves that we can approach them from that perspective. My colleagues also, Ben and Ayo?
I'll throw one out. This is a quotation from Bell Hooks, who wrote, "When we face pain in relationships, our first response is often to sever bonds." And we have separation across differences because there's pain there, I think, to some degree. And so it's actually, for me, it's a commitment to say, I am willing to endure some pain to be in relationship with you. That's worth it. And I just keep calling that up. And the pain isn't that bad. Well, sometimes it's tough, but sometimes there's so much joy. But it helps me to be like, this is part of what's going to happen. And it's so worth it, because then I'm not severing bonds. I'm making bonds. I'm realizing that we are all bound together already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I would just say, maybe we were too gentle in our speech by saying we may make mistakes. We will make mistakes. We will step on landmines. You may have heard this concept called cultural competency. It is impossible to be interculturally competent. Impossible. So likewise with religion and faith and spirituality. It might be helpful to acknowledge our vulnerability from the very beginning and our lack of knowledge. You know, hey, you know, I was thinking about such and such. I know nothing about it.
Mhm.
And depending on the context, would you mind helping me understand such and such? Because the reason why I want to know is because I want to connect with you in a more fruitful way, a deeper way, a more connected way. But right now, I'm to be honest with you, I don't know a damn thing about what you're talking about.
I if it's all right with the speakers, I'm going to move into the chat there. And thank you, Io. That is so, thank you. And this is from San Diego. This is for Reverend Ben Connolly. What role do you think silence has in complicity of enabling misconduct to proliferate? Generally speaking, and more specifically, how might an aging leader most skillfully navigate succession planning in light of the impermanence of leaders and top-down leadership structures?
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's a
I
big
know.
one.
There's a lot. So I'm going to answer it pretty briefly because we have a lot of questions here. And it was just, so since it's me, I'll answer. You know, I want to make a distinction between when Audre Lorde says, it refers to silence, she says, silence, your silence will not protect you.
Mm.
So she's talking about like, if when there is oppression, you try and hide, it's not going to work ultimately. We need to stand up in the face of oppression and violence and harm and occupy our place and bring our voices. But I've asked Zenju Earthland Manual about this distinction between the beneficial silence of our practice, which is to take time to be radically receptive and understand people. And actually, I think we can do both these things. So I've sat at a table with indigenous leaders and people from many different religious groups, as well as the head of the main consortium of Christian religious conservative groups at a table together with very, very differing views, and do my practice of being in the internal silence that makes space to really hear everyone, and then speak my truth about what I think we need to do in terms of justice. So I don't think I answered the second half of your question at all. Sorry, but should we? Do either you two want to say something, or should we move on to flow here?
I'm okay. Thank you.
It's hard. I would just say it's hard to have dialogue if you stay in silence. At some point, yeah, you have to speak. You got to speak about things.
On the other hand, as Ben said, there can be a healing kind of silence that gives us the inner space to be able to plunge into dialogue when we have that sense that there's something that is needed here.
Yeah.
Both sides need to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I saw one drop. Oh, here we go. Flo.
Hi, I'm Flo Lunn, and I'm calling in from Brooklyn, and I practice Soto Zen at the Brooklyn Zen Center.
Mm.
And I guess I've been loving these SBZA offerings. Thank you. And my question, I mean, this is such a rich conversation, especially with what's happening right now, and it feels like interfaith practice at this moment seems so like necessary and alive, and I'm just wondering if that's what you're feeling, like if that the religious community and like laying it feels like laying the ground for what could be, you know, and doing it together is starting to work with the ideas of differences coming together to be the ground that we can all flourish from, right? So I'm just curious, are you feeling that this is happening, like that the interfaith movement and the political landscape are, you know, marching, coming together? Is there going to be you know, like with like having Warnock in the government, like, will there be more people of faith entering the sphere, do you feel?
So we hope many more and more people are beginning to see that, well, there's something wrong with our society. Duh. And so with that, one temptation is, of course, to just retreat in one's own haven of peace and quiet and in one's own little circle. But then somehow there's something in us that tells us, no, I can't just be indifferent to all this. And so that's what I feel Zen practice can give us, that sense of empowerment to really go beyond our little egoic selves and to really plunge into something that we feel needs to be done because of our sense of justice, our sense of equality, our sense of family with one another. And if there's something, for example, just taking our own family, if there's something wrong, if somebody is hurting and somebody else in the family is causing that hurt, then it's not something that we can just be silent about. So in that regard, I hope that more and more can have that sensitivity to see and the courage to be able to stand up and say or do something or both. Anyway, that's what I feel. The pain is getting more and more widespread and more intense, and so I feel that that itself can be a stimulus to people to not just be silent, but to stand out and be able to proclaim what needs to be done from different, and also the importance of getting together, the importance of forming community that can be a community of resistance. That's something that we can also work on, I believe.
Flo, while you were speaking, there were many pauses because of technology. And so I don't know if I understood your question correctly. What I think I heard was you asking whether more people, at the end, whether more people of faith would be engaging in politics at this time because of the divisiveness. Probably yes, but maybe not with the belief systems that are most celebratory of
Yeah.
diversity.
Mm-hmm.
So because there's the surge in power of a particular mindset, and then unfortunately for some people, we have a two-party system.
Mm.
So it seems like for as complex as the United States is, we can't tolerate a complexity of political views. Nevertheless, my hope is not in what people believe in their own religious system as much as what does that system that they're in support solidarity and advocacy for people who are not in their belief system. And I hope more people like that will get engaged, whether they are elected officials or not. But we need to have this conversation because death is being justified on religious grounds, and we need to be able to talk about that.
Thank you. I wonder if we should go for another question. Thank you, Flo. We have two more. I don't know if we'll get to you both. Let's check it out. Carol?
Hi.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I'm taking this in a different direction. I'm more interested in my interpersonal relationships with different religions. I'm a longtime Zen practitioner, 3 years at Tassajara and many years. And I'm studying you right now, Ben, in Yogacara. But I go to Christmas Eve service and the candlelight service, and we sing Silent Night, and I move to tears every time.
Mm.
And I have friends, a good friend who's good Presbyterian. I've raised very happily Presbyterian, strongly and happily Presbyterian. So I have a good friend who goes to the Presbyterian church, and my brother is a very conservative Christian. I'm interested in finding Christ in my own heart, even though I'm 30 years serious Soto Zen student. One of my people in the breakout group gave me some good suggestions, including checking out. I never managed to check out Living Buddha, Living Christ by Thich Nhat Hanh. I never actually did that, but So I'm sure there's something in me that relates to Christ. And if I could find that more, it would help me relate to my friends who are Christians and maybe help open them up about, rather, because they don't talk about their religion very much. They go to the church and they do the things, but we don't really have religious conversations, which I would welcome. So anyway, that's how do I find Christ in my own heart? Thank you.
That brings me to a suggestion. There's a book by Richard Rohr entitled The Universal Christ, and he unpacks the meaning of that word Christ in a way that people without religion or people from other traditions can see and find some connection in. So I'd like to first suggest that book, and I'm sure that if you start reading that, there will be other books that you will be led into. And so I feel that it's really a big an important question, and I've been struggling with that question practically all my life since I started Zen myself. So thank you. I would just suggest that book first and then see where it takes you. Thank you, Carol. And where are you located, Carol? Oh, you're muted. Still.
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, thank you. Just wondering, just curious. Thank you.
Okay, Anne.
Okay. Hi there.
Hey.
It seems like I'm not sure how to say this without it seems like in intrafaith dialogue, intrafaith, as well as interfaith, but intrafaith, it takes this is who I am, this is what I believe, and against or in conversation with somebody who says, this is who I am, and this is what I believe. Having grown up Catholic, then becoming Soto Zen, Rinzai Zen, and then Soto Zen, and now making some movement back towards some Catholic churches. I would say it generally. I really don't know how to label myself. And, I think, well, why do I need a label? And I think, well, because a label defines me. And then I can say this is what I believe and what I don't believe. But I don't know. I guess I want a label, but I don't want to be fixed on it. Do you have any suggestions?
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Well, maybe what Ben said earlier, we don't need to be either or, but we can be both and. And so right now in the circles that Ayo and I belong to, the academic circles of the American Academy of Religion, there is a lot of conversation about multi-religious belonging. And it's becoming something that is wider and more widespread phenomenon, that people who come from a certain religious tradition feel that it's not really filling what their heart is longing for, so they try to look for another, and they find something there, but yet they don't want to abandon their root tradition, and so they see that they can be enriched by engaging in practice of both. I had a good friend who was a Zen teacher and who is now deceased, named Susan Postal, whom I learned a lot from. She said, well, she was Jewish by birth, origin, and then she started practicing Tibetan tradition and then became an Episcopal Christian in her teaching career. And so she described her sense of being enriched by those traditions that she had been engaged in. So she says, it's like two different ivies on my left arm and my right arm, and I am empowered by both, and inside me they find a way of integrating and supporting one another. So I love that way of Susan Postal's description of how those two traditions, well, three, actually for her it's three now, because of those three, the Jewish, the Christian, and the Buddhist, that somehow make her who she is. So I think that there's greater room for that. And the conceptual articulation of that is now being worked out among those who are academics. So I would say, follow your heart. And if we all do that, then somehow we'll end up meeting one another somewhere and we'll see one another as friends and as kin. Thank you for that question, Anne. And lovely garden, by the way.
I'll just say briefly on that question before we'll do a little wrap up here in just a second, but
Maybe Ayo has something.
like sometimes there's like space in an interfaith context to really unpack the depth of what it means for me, what my identity is as a religious person. And sometimes it's just like, I'm here and I'm just going to say I'm Buddhist because that's easy for everyone to kind of get something on. So the label is just something I use to help us have a relationship, and that can change contextually. Do you have anything on that question there, Ayo?
Yeah, I was just, I love these kinds of questions. And what it brought to mind is two teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh. One is to try not to abandon whatever root tradition you came with into your new tradition, because all of them at the core offer beauty. And then there's another teaching, which is when we talk about letting go in Buddhism, that includes letting go of Buddhism.
Mm.
And then if you add a little, I'm going to sprinkle a little Heart Sutra in there as well around emptiness. The dynamic is what's is important. So we use these labels as shorthand, but what is the dynamic one that's opening and continues to open? That's what I think we're trying to do in Catholicism, like radical Catholicism, the kind that is about serving others and mercy. That's what we're doing when we're talking about Jesus in our hearts, you know, following the example of the Good Samaritan. And that's what we're doing in Buddhism and in Zen by staying open and compassionate and responding appropriately. So words, yeah, they're just words. They're just pointing to something. What's the dynamic that we are cultivating? Question.
Beautiful. Okay, well, I noticed we've reached time. That was just, I could definitely end on that you just said. But does anyone else, either of you, want to say anything else in closing?
Just wanted to say thank you for your being here. And as I was saying earlier, my feeling, I'd like to just confess, I love you all. I hope we get to meet live at some point somewhere. When we meet somewhere, please let me know, oh, I was in that circle. And so then we can reconnect. Thank you.
That's gratitude, and inspiration. It's, you know, in a culture where so many people are being shut down and so many people are afraid to say what's on their hearts, to be engaged in dialogue on these important matters with people who care about other people is so nourishing. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just say thank you so much. This has been so grateful for everyone showing up, and in particular to Ruben and Ayo for bringing your wisdom and your heart. And I don't know, does Zena, Keegan, do you need to close us out with anything?
If Keegan doesn't have anything, I just want to say thank you, Reverend Connolly. Thank you, Reverend Abito.
Call me
And
by my true name.
yes. And thank
Ruben
you.
is okay.
Thank you, Ruben. And thank you, Dr. Ayo. And I want to say thank you to the board of directors of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association and the Soto Zen Buddhist Association DEIA committee. And thank you all who are in attendance today. Thank you so very much for being here with us. Before we end the event, please take a look at the information that's in the chat. We would appreciate if you would fill out the form and just give us some feedback about how did you feel about this event today? And that would be so helpful. I do want to, we are moving ahead with the theme, and it is great. And so I just want to say, save the date For May 16th and May 27th, we will have two events that will be presented by Diane Mouchot, Hamilton Roshi. So that's going to be very exciting. They're both workshops as well. So information is coming out soon for that. And also this, if you want to view past recordings, because we had this whole campaign event last year, and I just always want to remind you, you can go and take a look at past recordings and this recording that will be posted as well there on the SCBA YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for hanging in there with us. Bye-bye. See you later. Thank you. See you next time.